So welcome everyone. I just in the interest of time and to respect everyone's lunch hour, I'm going to get started and introduce our wonderful panelists, and then more people will be coming in as they log on. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Suzannah Stora, and I'm the director of the Humanities Research Center. I'm associate professor in the English department, and I'm so glad you're here to help us kick off our first event in the HRC series of Research Fridays, a series of events dedicated to supporting faculty and graduate students' ongoing research, mentoring, grant writing, and so much more. And as we did 2 years ago, I think we're coming back to previous good practices. Today's event is about grants and grant writing, particularly grants in the humanities. And today's event is co-sponsored by the VC Office of the Vice President for Research and Innovation and the VC Office of Development and Alumni Relations. And I'm delighted to introduce our wonderful speakers. Each team will take about 20 minutes, and we'll look forward to your questions and discussion at the end. So I'll introduce Melissa Throckmorton first. She'll do her presentation, and then I'll introduce our next two speakers. And then as you have questions, please use the Q&A function. We also have a chat box. I can navigate both of them. Use whichever makes more sense to you. So our first panelist today is Melissa Throckmorton, Director of Research Development and Strategic Projects in the VC Office of the Vice President for Research and Innovation. Melissa has over 18 years of grant writing experience. She's also a very good human being and just a wonderful resource for all of us. Of those 18 years, 13 years have been spent in academia. And before joining VCU in 2016, Melissa worked in research development at Old Dominion in Norfolk. She received her BA in political science and business, so fellow humanist, and an MPA from Virginia Tech. The Division of Research Development in the OVPRI, as many of you know, offers assistance in project management for proposal preparation, strategic proposal planning, editing, finding funding, as well as VC-wide training and workshops. And as a personal note, I think Melissa is also a powerhouse and has the answers to all your questions about federal grants. So Melissa, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Christina. Well, I'm really hoping that I can live up to that. So let's see what happens. Okay. So I just wanted to thank Christina and Ronnie for inviting me to this. This is one of the things that we do most often that I just love. I mean, it's so much fun for us. And as Christina said, I've been at VCU about 7 years now. And we're just really excited to work with you. So I just wanted to tell you that there'll be 3 different cheat sheets that Christina is going to be sending out after the presentation. And you'll also be getting my presentation in PDF that you can use as well with the active links in it. What did I do? Okay. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about getting your project ready. Where do you start? About 4 steps about getting your idea and your project ready to go. Because basically grant writing, the proposal submission and the actual writing of the grant is the last thing that you do, getting together the supplemental documents. So there's actually quite a bit of work that you can do ahead of time that you can use for different types of proposals. So you can use them as rapid fire if you're going to be doing different proposals to funding organizations over the next 3 months or so. If you do this work ahead of time, then all you really have to do is update it. And then you can just go ahead and keep going in your funding searches and proposals. And then I'm going to have some information for you, as well as some of the students that I understand are also on the webinar, and some final thoughts. So I just wanted to get started with, this is one of my favorite cartoons about grant writing, but grant writing is a skill that anybody can learn. When I started out in nonprofits, I actually started with Grant Writing for Dummies. It was literally the book I started with that was in its 2nd edition, and now I think it's in its 8th. So this is something that if you practice and that if you work, and even if you get a mentor, and we are happy to help in my office, Ariana and her office are also absolutely amazing. You have some amazing people in your college as well that can help. And I think it's really something that you will like, and the more you practice it, the easier it's going to get. So one of the things that I like to kind of go through, and this is what's going to link into the 4 steps that we're going to go into in a minute, is the grant readiness checklist. And we have a way more involved form of this that I can send you if you're interested in having that. So basically, you're looking at, you form the project idea that you want to try to fund, and you have an idea about how you need to prepare that project and what kind of timelines that you're working on. And then you have the collaborators and the partners that you need, and then you're ready to, or you've already found a funding mechanism. So getting to this point, though, is a several step process that I've kind of whittled down over the years into 4, and we're going to go through that in a minute. I just wanted to quickly run through kind of the parts of the grant and the types of the grant and grant making organizations. So we have the federal funders that a lot of people are basically aware of, the agencies, the Department of Education, National Endowment for the Humanities. You can also do things state and locally. There are a lot of different things in the humanities. Some of the libraries will have grants that you can get. The City of Richmond, the Wilder School, I know, does a lot of work in contracting around from the City of Richmond as well as Virginia. There's large foundations, which is a lot of what Ariana's group deals with, Kresge, Bill and Melinda, regional and local foundations, which Ariana can also talk about, Virginia Endowment for the Arts, Community Foundation, United Way, and then corporations, Bank of America, Dominion Energy, industry research and development divisions. So there's lots of different places that you can go. One other one that didn't really fit on here is your professional organizations. That's a really big place that you can also go to take a look for funding opportunities. And then I just wanted to run through some of the types of applications. I know sometimes students or really early stage investigators are not actually aware of the different types of grants that you can do and the different types of ways that you can submit them. So there's a letter of intent, which most of the time would not be necessarily required, but sometimes it is, which is just the notification to a funder that you're going to be applying. A lot of times they'll use these way more in sort of the biomedical sciences, so that they can know and be able to find different ways and different reviewers for the funding, because they don't have standing panels that will review the different proposals that come in. Then there's preliminary or pre-proposals, which are shorter proposals to the funders. Sometimes you will also have these with foundations where you submit a preliminary or a pre-proposal so that they can decide whether or not they're going to invite you to do a full proposal for that organization. Then there's full proposals. And a lot of times now, which Ariana and Suzannah can talk a little bit more about, they'll have online for foundations, corporations, and also any nominations that you might want to do around in the humanities and sciences for faculty members as well as students. So this is the basic elements of a grant, and this is whether you're doing biomedical, biology, physics, humanities. You may not have all of these pieces, but these are some of the standard pieces that you're going to run across. So you'll have to do sort of a project summary page. Then you'll have your description and narrative where they want you to talk about your need, your overall goal of what you're doing, any research questions, or the goals and objectives of your program or your project, your scholarly work, basically, why you're doing it, what's going to come out of it, your outcomes and outputs, methodology if you're actually working on a research project, evaluation plans if you're doing something with a program or in education, and then broader impacts and education. And broader impacts normally is going to talk about the public at all. So kind of at large, it's if you're doing something with the museum, or if you're doing something, say, an installation or an art exhibit or something at a museum, that's going to be a really impactful thing that you would want to include in the broader impacts. And then education is more on the side of if you're doing something with students in K through 12 or preschool, or you're doing something at the graduate school or undergraduate level. And then some of the supplementary things that you have, you'll always have a budget, no matter if it's just asking for a lump sum amount. Biographical sketches or CVs are normally something that you'll also always have to include. Any previous or current funding that you have. And we found that foundations are actually starting to do this as well, so that they want to find out if they're going to be funding all of your project or just a part of your project, to make sure that you're not getting money from two different places. Any resources that you might need, space or equipment, or anything that you might need, any kind of, I don't know, visa things or travel, conference stuff, anything like that that you might need that would go along with your project. Any support, commitment letters, collaboration letters, you'll run across those from time to time, especially if you're doing anything with the community or the school systems. And then data management plans. A lot of people will believe that data management plans are only for sort of biomedical or National Science Foundation or National Institutes of Health. And that's not necessarily the case now. A lot of times your foundation funders will also want to know how the data is going to be stored, what kind of access it's going to be in, are you going to be using an open science framework for anything? And usually this is around the larger ones, Robert Wood Johnson or Howard Hughes Medical Institute, things like that. And you'll find that these are going to be more and more particular and called for. Okay, now we're going to move into the idea and the project preparation, the 4 steps that I was talking about before. So the first step is you want to evaluate your idea and your project where it is now. So you want to look at what you're passionate about, which I'm sure almost all of you have answered that question, or some of you may be changing your passion right now. So once you look at what you're passionate about, what is sort of the problem or the need or the gap in the scholarly work or research that you'd want to be inquiring about or writing about, or trying to figure out what is going to expand the field. And then how is the existing knowledge or practice inadequate? So what gaps are you trying to fill? What have some people done, but you want to take it a step further? You have a completely brand new idea that you're bringing, or sort of a new hypothesis that you're bringing to a scholarly area that you're going to be writing a book about. You want to really think about that and distill it down to a few points so that you would be able to talk about it in about 30 seconds. And then that will allow you to just make sure that it's really clear in your own mind and when you're talking to funders or somebody else. And then what are your research questions, your program goals? What's the project program outcomes or outputs? Now, this can be as simple as, simple but not easy as a book or an article, all the way up to, a 5-year program that you're doing in education, where you're taking a look at, different things across grades that might be more longitudinal. And some of the humanities work that we've seen has crossed over into the biomedical. We've had a lot of different collaborations recently in environmental works, as you know, with Christina's Humanities Center, and in the biomedical realm, arts and health. So there are a lot of different collaborations that are coming up where it's not only single investigators now. So that's something where you would want to make sure that you are also thinking about as well. So the biggest thing that you're going to want to take a look at is, why is your work significant? So basically, how is it going to move your field forward? Why should your work be funded over anybody else's? What are the broader impacts, and who's going to benefit from this? And then once you've done that work and really thought about it and really kind of evaluated where you are, you want to do an investigation so that you can do an honest and thorough evaluation of the significance. So in order to do that, we need to do a really thorough deep dive into what already exists in that area or what doesn't exist in the area. So has your community program need or gap or scholarly area already been addressed, partially or in full? Or can you find absolutely nothing on it after an exhaustive search, which means that you're really come into as the first in the field, which a lot of times will happen? Or do you find sort of a partial piece and you're going to want to really try to move that forward? Do you need to refine it or change course based on what you find? And then if you're in doubt, go ahead and contact a program officer at the agency, the foundation, or the organization where you're interested in submitting a proposal. A lot of people are hesitant to do this, but it's one of the most beneficial things that you can do to find out about where your project fits, where your work fits, and you can go ahead and contact them. And it really, a lot of them will talk to you. They'll either talk to you on the phone or they'll email back. And we have different drafts of emails, or we're happy to help you try to get in touch with program officers so that you can talk to them ahead of a time. And this will a lot of times save you some time about figuring out where your work will best fit. And then step 3 is you need to plan. So you're going to want to define and refine the project idea. I usually will try to get people to do this on paper, because that way you can really kind of take a look at it and write everything down in order. A couple of different ways that you can do that is if you want to use a timeline for the project, which you're probably most of the time going to need anyway, but this will also really help you think through what the start and ending dates of your project may be, which could be very important depending on, when a museum may be, running an exhibit, or if you want to find out when a particular work, it would be the best time for that work to be published. If you want to look at a research grant that you might be doing with the school system, you don't want your grant to come in and your money to come in October or November, because that's not really going to help if you need to start doing stuff at the beginning of the school year. So you really want to take a look at the timing. So clearly state your need or gap and why you're doing the work, your hypothesis or an overarching goal that you have for the work. Specific aims, research questions, goals, and objectives, depending on the type of project that you're doing. Again, any outcomes or outputs that you might have. Your timeline, like I said, is really important. Are you going to need an evaluator? Do you need collaborators? Do you need consultants? Do you need to find other people in the field that you can work with that may also be on your grant? Any required personnel, travel, permission to investigate, or use primary resources. A lot of times you may have to contact in advance, get letters of recommendation in order to have access. All of these things can take time. So you're going to want to make sure that you're incorporating that into whatever you do as far as the timeline. And when you're looking at where you're going to apply. So your total cost, be as realistic and specific as you can. One of the things that I like to tell people is to make sure that you're matching your project to the opportunity and not necessarily how much money the opportunity is. So you want to figure out how much money you're going to need for your project, and then you're going to want to go and look for something that matches that and kind of not the other way around. because what you'll find is either you may be promising too much or too little if you find something that really doesn't fit the budget that you've come up with for your own project. So the last step, once you've done all of that work, which most of the time when I've talked to people, they've done this over, maybe like 1 or 2 months, that it's kind of taken them because they've really already been thinking about their idea. So they do the homework. So then you're going to want to look for what funders are appropriate for your work. What's your ideal project start date, which is what we've just talked about. Future projects, so is this something that would be its own encapsulated project? Is it part of something larger that you might want to do? So just think about that a little bit, and then get to know your funders, the mission and priorities, their funding award rates. Some of the foundations that you might go to may be a bit smaller. NEH sometimes will have larger funding rates. The budget, the policies, the politics, and believe it or not, politics are actually quite a big impact on funding right now for the humanities and a lot of different areas. There's a lot of stopgaps. I know everyone knows about the shutdown that could unfortunately be looming. All of these things will impact the funding budgets, for the National Endowment, and all of that also trickles down to any money that would go into foundations, because a lot of them will get donations, and a lot of that money is going to come from different places that could also be shut off depending on what happens with the budgets. So although, a lot of times now we don't even want to pay attention to politics or anything like that, sometimes it actually can, be very informative as to where your money could come from. Okay, now I'm just going to run into funding searches a little bit, and I'm going to go kind of fast here. So all of this information you're going to get and you'll have links to. So the first thing that you have to check behind your timeline is eligibility. So please make sure that you read the eligibility for the opportunity that you're looking at. I've had time and time again people who have tried to apply for things and then they find out that their PhD, they're too far out, or their discipline doesn't exactly fit, or their timelines don't fit, or they don't fund that. The review cycles are off. The grant project periods don't match up. They're just not eligible based on their discipline or things like that. So please just make sure that you are double checking that. And then the third thing that you may want to check into, and a lot of times this comes in with the humanities as well as education, is cost share or matching funds. So cost share funding means that they will expect your organization, VCU, to pitch in money that's going to offset some of the money that they are going to be giving you. So say you would get $100,000, you have a 25% cost share. They could either make that as part of the $100,000, or they could say that you have to add $25,000 on top of that. Matching funding, which is most of the time what you're going to find in the humanities, is where they'll say, we'll give you $50,000, but you have to also have $50,000 that you're contributing to the project, either through VCU or through some other mechanism, volunteer hours, or facilities, or anything like that that can be sort of in-kind matching costs. And you have to have that money before they'll release the other $50,000 that would make up the total $100,000 that you had. And a lot of times these are sort of mixed and matched and used as the same phrase, but they are different. So if there's any time that you have any question about that, please reach out to your CHS research administrators. They are fantastic, and they will definitely be able to help you navigate that issue. And please make sure that you have that navigated ahead of time, because sometimes projects will not be able to go in because of the matching funding or the cost shares are not in place. And that's really unfortunate if the investigator has put a lot of work into that. So we don't want that to happen. Okay. So the last couple of things that I wanted to go through is sometimes people really overlook internal funding. And we have a lot of internal funding programs at VCU. And I know that Christina has taken advantage of these. We have some other people who have also taken advantage of them that are doing some amazing work. And a lot of these are all going to be open now. And all of these links will work. Two of the ones that a lot of times will work for some of the humanities and arts work and social sciences is the VCU Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences Fund. That is funded in partnership with the Provost's office. It's up to $10,000 for a year. The Breakthroughs Fund is a really large grant, but we have had humanities and arts and education and medicine have gone into one grant so that they can come up with a arts and health institute, which is really fantastic. And those are 200,000, 18 to 24. And then one of the other ones, the last ones that I'm going to talk about is the Quest grant. So those are up to $50,000 for 18 months. And that will actually include a cost share that has to come from CHS. So you're going to want to talk about that ahead of time with your research dean, Angela Reynolds, or your chair, or some like that, so that you can make sure that you would be in the running for that. You want to make sure that they know that you're going to be trying to apply. Those are actually reviewed in the College of Humanities and Sciences. So the OVPRI doesn't actually oversee that review process. They come to us after they've already been ranked by the school. So it's in your best interest to kind of talk about those project ideas ahead of time. And then the College of Humanities and Sciences and the Humanities Research Center itself have a lot of different internal funding opportunities that you can go to and take a look at. And I will also, in this, actually on the last slide that we were, at the top of the list is the full list of VCU university-wide funding. OVPRI has put together a list that is updated all the time of all of the internal funding across the entire university at VCU. And that link is there. Right now, there are 42 different funding opportunities that are listed in there. All the way humanities, social sciences, arts, biomedical, all different types of ones that you're going to want to take a look at. And then we also have Pivot, which you're going to get a cheat sheet about that will tell you exactly what it is. It's a free funding database that everyone at VCU can sign up with, including students, anyone with the vcu.edu address. This has federal agencies, foundations, everything, research grants, faculty fellowships, student and trainee fellowships. It also has dissertation funding. So you want to make sure that you sign up for that and take a look at it, and you'll get a fully detailed sheet about how to do that and how to do some different funding searches. And it's great because it will actually deliver whatever it is that you put in your funding search to your email once a week. So it actually works really well. And then these are just some ones that I put together based on who our audience was today. So these are some of the NEH fellowships. Some of them are coming up. The summer fellowships they're going in now, and that limited submission has already happened. There's NEH fellowships that are actually coming up. The digital humanities, I know that we have at least one digital humanities grant that is going out from VCU in January. And then the student and faculty ones below, Pro Fellow it's a free database of about 2,600 awards for graduate study and professional development. Now, I apologize in advance because you have to email sign up and they make you watch a little video, but then you get access to all of these different types of funding. the National Humanities Center, American Philosophical Association. All of these, they're like, it's just clearinghouses of all different types of opportunities. They're not just philosophy opportunities. It has all kinds of different things that you can take a look at. If you would need any help navigating these, just let us know, and we're happy to help. And then I just have a few final thoughts. So these are my final tips that you can take a look at when you get the proposal, and then just celebrate your successes. You know, a lot of people will only look at, you know, hey, I didn't get this, so now I have to try again. But, you know, even really good reviews and where you're going to go back in, that's a success. So just make sure that you're celebrating yourself and, you know, you don't get down about this. And then this is us, John Ryan, myself, and Mary Strotterman, who a lot of you might have known from the Office of Sponsored Programs. We stole her, and now, fortunately, she works for us. So I'm very excited about that. And I know that was fast, and I'm sorry. And if you have any questions, please just let me know.
Thanks so much, Melissa. We'll save the questions for the end. So I've noticed some people have started typing them, but in the interest of time, I would like to introduce our next two speakers, and then we'll save the questions for the end. So our next speakers are Ariana Bracalente and Suzannah Stora from the VCU Development and Alumni Relations. And I'll start with Ariana. Ariana Bracalente serves as the Director of Philanthropic Grants in the VCU Office of Development and Alumni Relations, where she leads a small team focused on securing private support for university priorities by fostering relationships with corporations, foundations, and other philanthropic organizations. And now listen to this. In addition, she develops and writes proposals to university friends and alumni considering gifts at the 7- and 8-figure level. That is no small feat, Ariana. She has worked at VCU for more than 35 years and in corporate and foundation relations for more than 25. And during this time, she has secured and stewarded grant funding from national and regional foundations, including the Mellon Foundation, Howard Hughes Medical Institute, the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund, the ECMC Foundation, the Robbins Foundation, Virginia Healthcare Foundation, E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, Wingate, and many others, as well as major corporations. And Ariana says that the most rewarding part of her job, and I've witnessed this firsthand in working with her over the last almost 3 years, is that the most rewarding part of her job is working with faculty to articulate support for programs that impact the lives of others and enrich the educational experiences of our students. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Suzannah Stora, whom I met recently, who joined the VCU Department of Alumni Relations Corporate and Foundation Relations team as the Assistant Director in January this year. Suzannah served as the Executive Director of the Maggie Walker Governor School Foundation from 2016 to 2020, and she brings more than 2 decades of experience from the nonprofit sector, having worked as the Sustainability Director for the Virginia Center for Health Innovation, the Director of the Junior League of Richmond, the Director of Development and Public Relations for the Medical Society of Virginia Foundation, and in several fundraising roles for the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. Suzannah is a graduate of Leadership Metro Richmond, Syracuse University, and James Madison University. Ariana and Suzannah, many thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. We are grateful for the opportunity to talk with faculty, and I understand there's also some students who have enrolled in this and little webinar, so I appreciate it. And a special shout out to Melissa. She covered a lot of nuts and bolts that parallel the work that we do. And as we were thinking about putting this together, I want to focus on the role of corporate and foundation relations here at VCU inside the Office of Development and Alumni Relations, and maybe some differences on working with our office versus working with sponsored programs. And Suzannah's been a great teammate in working with the Monroe Park campus faculty. So let's begin. So First of all, I think it would be helpful for you to see where we sit in the big pie at VCU. So VCU Development and Alumni Relations, and we're in the Office of Corporate and Foundation Relations. And in that, we sit under the Senior Associate Vice President for Presidential and University Philanthropy. The mission of Development and Alumni Relations is to engage stakeholders with our institution and to maximize philanthropic support, and working in partnership with all of VCU's schools, programs, and campuses as one development and alumni relations community to implement best practices and efficient strategies to achieve a comprehensive development program. I know that's a mouthful, but we consist of a central team, and we have units throughout the schools and colleges. And so, for instance, in the College of Humanities and Sciences, there is a development team that focuses on raising funds to support some of the priorities of that particular college, including student scholarships, endowed professorships, and other initiatives. Who we are. You got me. And in addition to Suzannah and myself, Franny Noble joined the team exactly 2 years ago, and she's our Associate Director for Corporate and Foundation Relations. And her primary focus right now is working with faculty and administrators on the health sciences campus. And we just added a director of corporate relations, Katie Ferguson. I think she's finished her second, maybe she's into her third week. And then there's an associate director, Courtney Hammock. I will gloss very quickly over the corporate relations piece of this presentation because that is definitely Katie's strength. One of the things that's helpful for you to understand is what our role is in the big picture, because university policy dictates that fundraising activities must happen and be coordinated through the Office of the Division of Development and Alumni Relations. Our unit manages strategic relationships with corporate and foundation partners. We centrally manage this so that we can ensure that relationships with funders are consistent and there aren't multiple units from across the university trying to communicate with a foundation simultaneously. That would be overwhelming for any funder. Much of our work is guided by VCU's strategic plan, and we will be adding to our website in the future a form for faculty to request for assistance from our office. Generally, what we do is we meet with campus partners to discuss funding initiatives. We research prospective corporate and foundation funders that may align with strategic projects. We share RFPs and funding opportunities with faculty, staff, and administrators. So we're generally beating the bush on a regular basis to keep abreast of opportunities that are that bubble up from foundations and corporations. We communicate directly and represent the university with corporate and foundation partners. We also assist with drafting letters of inquiry. We collaborate on proposal development. We help submit applications and proposals, and we complete interim and final reports. And we also develop stewardship plans for corporate and foundation gifts and grants. Stewardship lays the foundation for future funding opportunities. And Suzannah is going to tell us a little bit about the benefits of working with us and how the process works.
Yeah, so I would say that, one of the things that we really are able to offer you is, first of all, to help you know if your project really aligns with the mission of the university. And also, in addition to helping you seek this funding, we serve as a relationship builder with the funders, particularly our local funders in the area. We are trying to maintain a long-standing relationship, and even if a proposal is not awarded, it's good for us to have that relationship moving forward and having that relationship with the program officers that we work with. We have a great institutional knowledge of those donors. We also work at times to reduce internal competition. So there have been situations where, you know, there might be more than one team that is interested in going after an opportunity. Ariana always says we don't want to be a police officer. We're more of aircraft control, like to make sure that we don't have multiple people going at the same time. And sometimes determining which proposal would be the best comes down to what's the better fit, what has a more likelihood of being funded, and also if it aligns perhaps with the presidential priority of the university. And then in the nitty gritty of it all, we sort of help with some of the proposal management that can look different across different teams. I hope that you are familiar with your director of development for your school. At times they are very involved with that process. Some are not as involved and really tend to focus more on the individual side of fundraising. But we help you put together that proposal. I think Melissa did an awesome job of kind of showing like the different things that you need to go through in terms of thinking through your proposal. And I really think that process has got to be so key in helping you develop your project, because there's so many things that you have to think about. And oftentimes you come across questions that you never even thought to ask, or background that you needed, especially in terms of the evaluation piece. I think it's super helpful. And so we kind of help you work through that. We work in different capacities with different faculty and areas. Some, you know, most people in academia are very good writers, but they this might not be the kind of writing they like to do. Sometimes they can give me bullets, and I'm happy to help, you know, hone those down. I was telling someone we're working on a proposal for just yesterday, you know, Ariana and Franny and I are like whizzes at character counts because we are so used to cutting down text and simplifying language. And so areas like that we're super helpful with. We also work in connection with the different affiliate foundations. So one of the things that separates us, I think, from Melissa's work is that most of the proposals that we're submitting go through one of the affiliate foundations here at the university. And the humanities, of course, we would often be working with the VCU Foundation. We have a relationship already with their executive director and their team. We have all that documentation that's needed to submit a proposal. We also would be able to help, pending an award, negotiate, you know, your agreement, that type of thing with the leadership at the VCU Foundation. And then finally, one of the things I wanted to say is, so we right now, and at least on our side, and I know it's different probably than Melissa's work, but most of our stuff for the most part is going online. Like most of our applications are online. Within our office, we sort of house a master list of ways to log on to all the different online portals. And so it's housed there. So we would be responsible ultimately for the submission of that grant so that we can monitor it. It can only go out of our office, and we can avoid confusion from it coming from different parts of the area. And lastly, we help monitor the stewardship and reporting piece, often with your national funders. There's a stewardship piece that has to happen, even sometimes at the presidential level. So we would help negotiate that. Ariana, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's very helpful. I think it's going to be helpful for us to clarify that why you might be working with our office as opposed to sponsor programs. One of the things that as Suzannah mentioned, the relationship with the affiliate foundations, and that would be like the MCV Foundation or the VCU Foundation. And there are quite a few funders, corporations and foundations that require that their grants go to a 501c3 organization. And VCU as an institution is a governmental instrumentality, so it's a 170c1. And so if a funder requires that the applicant organization and the recipient organization be a 501c3, then these things go in under the umbrella of one of our affiliate foundations. And what Suzannah was talking about is how we work together with those foundations to make sure that they can sign off on the agreement and that you have all of the things that you need, which are usually a little bit different than what might be needed when applying through sponsored programs. The IRS letter is different. It's a 501c3 letter. The 990s, which are I know that some applications through sponsored program also require that. And the work that we do is focused on a charitable grant, which is a voluntary donation to a tax-exempt organization exclusively for religious, charitable, scientific, literary, or educational purposes. And a charitable grant is one in which the funder does not receive a potential commercial benefit or profit and does not support charitable purposes. And even though in the humanities, we're less likely to hear about R&D in which a corporation is giving money for the development of a better delivery of a drug or a widget, if there's a financial gain to a corporation, that cannot go through our office because it's not considered charitable. We developed a short column of table to kind of talk about the difference between whether you would go through our office or whether you would go through sponsored programs. On the CFR side, you see that I highlighted the 501c3, and we're bound by an agreement and not a contract. If it's a government entity, federal, state, or local, and if it's financial or commercial benefit to the donor and it's bound by a contract, that has to go through sponsored programs. Other things that we consider, if a foundation does not require a 501c3 and will accept funding requests from a public agency, and the work that is being done requires something such as IRB and other compliance issues, that we automatically engage sponsor programs and route it in that direction. Let's see. I think I pretty much covered all of this. A little semantics. Melissa actually talked a little bit about this, and I love being able to tag team off of her because she was talking about some different terminology that may slightly vary when working with a foundation. Okay. I don't know that Melissa covered, but limited submissions are unwritten rules. Sometimes they're written rules in which a foundation will limit the number of proposals that VCU can commit or can submit in a cycle or a year. And so our office can help, as Suzannah said, navigate that. If we have a local funder who limits only one from VCU per year, or one from the Monroe Park campus through the VCU Foundation, and one from the MCV Foundation, we can help navigate, the timing of that, the air traffic control, as when's the best time to go in, what's the best fit, and what is that foundation likely to fund. Some terminology, other differences. She mentioned cost share or in kind, and cost share is a term found in those grant applications that require VCU to share the cost or to identify matching funds from other sources. But another way in which we can share, and she talked about volunteer, is through in kind. In the work that we do with foundations, often they don't want to be the sole funder of a project. They're trying to effect change. They want to invest in programs. However, they don't want to be the only one investing in a particular program. So they will ask you, who else is funding this? Who else is supporting this project? And oftentimes you have to provide a budget that shows both what you're asking them to support, as well as who else is supporting, and how much your institution is committing to it. And so that may be a slight difference in the terminology. The matching requirement in sponsored programs, we work in an area called matching challenge grants, in which a funder may say, we will give you 50,000 if you raise 50,000. So that's another type of slight difference in terminology. And sponsor programs pretty universally uses the word sponsor or funder. And when they're coming through the affiliate foundations, we use the terms funder or donor, because this grant is going to be charitable as far as the donor is concerned, or as far as the foundation is concerned. And the other difference, we do not collect indirect costs for units, but we do collect a university reinvestment fee of 6%. And it is based on the total request and not the direct cost. So that's just some.
That's a good clarification. Thank you, Ariana. And maybe Melissa, at some point, you can also clarify the question about the overhead, because my understanding is that in certain fields, the overhead is a little lower than in the hard sciences or the medical sciences. So can you speak to that?
Sure. So what Ariana was saying about limited submissions, we also coordinate the limited submissions that go through sponsored programs in my office. And those you will also find listed in just a separate list, a separate link on the same page where you'll find the internal funding. So those are updated every single week, the ones that are open. As far as the indirect costs, so indirect costs, basically for those of you who aren't familiar, is the money that would come back to the universities and the different schools and colleges from the grant for administrative costs, everything from facility costs to paying administrative staff in the different areas that work on the grants, things of those natures. So some of the larger agencies like the National Institute of Health, as well as the National Science Foundation, will collect what's called our institutional indirect cost rate, which is set by the federal government. It's about 55.1%, I think, right now. And the thing about that is different agencies collect that in different ways. The National Institutes of Health will allow you to add it on top. So it would not, it would be based on the direct costs that you have in your grant, which is what you're paying for your project. And then you add the 55%, the amount 55% of that money on top for the things that you can have those rates for. NSF, you have to take that out of the entire project budget. So it's not added on top. The money for the project is actually decreased by 55%. A lot of, depending on where you're doing, and again, it depends on where you're doing the work as well. It's lower if you're off campus. It can be lower if you're doing programs. It actually gets quite complicated. So if you had any questions about that, I'm happy to walk you through it. Your research dean, Angela, is happy. Christina knows a lot about it. Ariana can walk you through it. What you'll find is a lot of foundations will have lower indirect cost rates, so they'll cap it. The Department of Education, for instance, will almost always cap any of their programs, except one that I found this year, at 8%. A lot of foundations will not let you have any indirect costs at all. It will be zero. The sponsor just says, no, we're only paying for direct project number money. And then there's some others which will be lower depending on, what work you're doing, if you're using students. So sometimes it's calculated in a different way. So it really depends on the funder. Most of the federal funders that you'll find will use the negotiated rate that we have. for either off campus or on campus.
Right.
So if you need help like reading through the RFP or anything like that to try to figure out, what that percentage would be or what you would need to do to kind of calculate it, I'm happy to help. And your CHS research administrators are probably the best people to go to first to try to figure out what's best for your project.
Thank you for that. And Ariana, back to you. I don't know if you had any closing remarks before we open it up for questions.
Well, I was going to just fly through the slides here and just kind of, there were just a couple slides I wanted to show before we go.
Sure.
There's a lot of nuts and bolts that we just didn't have time for. And then Melissa did cover a good deal of stuff. Here's a sample of corporate and foundation funders that we are partners that VCU works with, and that we have both received funding from and we continue to maintain a relationship with. And I'm going to skip through all the before you begin because she did that. I did want to point out this slide when you guys get the slides that here's some sources in addition to Pivot that you can look for potential funding. There also is at the bottom right, there is a link to grants to individuals. And so these would be the types of things that students would be looking for, or faculty, if you're looking for specific just grants to do your research. The Foundation Center has a list of 10,000 funders that give grants to individuals, and that's a link there. And one of the Melissa did talk about looking carefully at eligibility, and I would point out that when you are doing research, not only do you want to align with their priorities and areas of interest, but be sure that you are applying to a funder that will fund in Virginia. I have had to be the wet blanket on more than one faculty's enthusiasm in having identified a funder when, you drill down and find out they fund in North Carolina or they fund west of the Mississippi. So those are things to consider. And then I just given a quick example of some arts and humanities grants that we have had here at VCU. And just as a sampling, so you can see we have received some funding. Generally, these are programmatic as opposed to individual research. But
Ariana, I'm sorry to interrupt. Would you mind sharing your screen so folks can actually see this?
Oh, is it not being shared?
No. We were wondering here in the chat, and no, it's not showing up. No.
Hold on. Something happened in the process of doing the Zoom. Hold on. Let me go back to full screen. More. Interesting. I don't know.
Thank you.
There we go.
We are recording this, so those of you who have signed up, and I know some of you need to leave early, but we'll follow up with you and share all these materials with you. So thank you.
Can you see it now? I think when we switched over, I don't know when I lost screen sharing. Had I lost it all along?
Yes. That's okay. Now we have it. So we can browse through these quickly, Ariana, and then we'll share them with everyone. No worries at all.
Okay. I missed a step when I was doing this. I thought I was live. So let me send this live real quick and I will run it through. So these are all the slides. Oh, how embarrassing.
That's okay. No worries at all. This is very useful. And there's a question here in the chat, as we go through this, maybe it will be addressed, whether we have a list of the affiliate foundations that we work with. So you mentioned VCU Foundation and MCV Foundation. I think faculty are wondering if there are others.
Yes. I had a list of them here. So we have. There we go.
Okay, perfect.
You see that? So we have the MCV Foundation, the VCU Foundation, the Business Foundation, and the College of Engineering Foundation. There is a real estate foundation, but we don't do any sort of philanthropic grants through that.
Excellent.
I wish somebody had popped in sooner and said, hey, Cypher's up there.
We try to stay in the chat so we don't share this with everyone. No worries at all. I think everyone will really appreciate them and as they study through. And one of the questions I have, which I'm sure you address here, Ariana, since Melissa went over Pivot, what are some of the ways in which our faculty and graduate students can search for foundation grants at VCU?
There we go.
Okay.
Here's
perfect.
a link. And so we have Candid. We have the Philanthropy News Digest. Those are free. What I want to mention is on the Foundation Directory online, if you want access to that, we have 5 seats. I reserve 1 seat to share with faculty that I can, if you send me an email, I will give you an access for a period of time. We'll have an agreed amount. You need it for 1 week, 2 weeks. And anyone on my team would be glad to give you a tour on how to work inside that directory. And the bottom link is the one that I mentioned, the grants to individuals, also managed by candid.org. And GuideStar is a list of all nonprofits. So these are all those organizations, 501c3, and does include foundations. And those are free resources.
I would also say too, like I invite, if you have a great idea or something that's pre-formulated that you're searching for funding for, send that to one of us. And so it'll just be on our mind because we are always looking through these RFP lists, seeing opportunities all the time, and we don't know what we don't know. So please, share where you are, and then hopefully we can share what we find.
Excellent. And one more question before we go. For folks who haven't done much foundation grant application or applying, what would you say the biggest differences are between applying for, a federal grant from an NEH or maybe some folks have applied for NIH grants, and applying for a foundation grant? What would be the main differences to consider? I heard, make sure you check eligibility to make sure that this applies for Virginia, right? That you can apply that. But what should people know before they even start researching those opportunities?
I will say that the biggest difference is that foundations want to affect social change. Okay, so each foundation has their own mission, they have their priorities, and they make investments in research, programs, and all of this in order to make some change and impact on society. And so that I would say is the biggest difference between that and maybe governmental grants. What do you think, Melissa?
I would say the same thing. There are, so basically how I sort of describe it to people is that there's mission-based agencies and investigator-driven agencies. So mission-based would be most of the foundations, actually all of the foundations that I have seen. And then agencies like the Department of Education or the Department of Defense, they'll have very certain things that they want to fund. They'll have certain programs they want to fund. So they will be very specific about the programming and requests for proposals they put out. Agencies like the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation are normally fully investigator driven. So they will have set programs or parent programs, but what is funded is fully the investigator's idea. And you'll find that a lot more as well as in NEH. So it just kind of depends. NEH is pretty mission driven, but they have so many different programs and so many different areas that it's pretty easy to find something that your work will fit into. So I guess that's what I would say the two main differences are.
Great. And thank you so much for sticking around. We are at time. We are beyond time. And I apologize for taking a few extra minutes of your Friday afternoon time. We will have a copy of this recording sent to everyone who registered, along with the presentations and the handouts. Thank you so much for sharing those with us. And thank you for being here. This is a wealth of information. Please reach out to us. I know our office, OSP, our Office of Sponsored Programs, and our Dean for Research in the College of Humanities and Sciences are also planning a nuts and bolts webinar later in the year. I think it may be October or November. So stay tuned for another process, and reach out to us, to Melissa, Ariana, or Suzannah, and as you work on your next proposal. Thank you so much, ladies. This was wonderful. I really appreciate your time and wisdom, and we will see you soon. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.